What was a house rule you had as a kid that you thought was completely normal until you grew up and realized not all households followed? My mum used to pay me to be my own babysitter between the ages of 10-14 or so. The rule was that as long as I didn't make a mess and I'd put myself to bed by the time she got home, then I got $10 in the morning. When I was really young, I had a night-night bell. It was this old clay bell that hung in the kitchen. And when I had to go to bed, I got to ring the bell and everyone would come say goodnight and then I would go to bed. Not really a rule, but a weird little ritual in our house. My family had a thing we called the food blanket. When we'd eat casual meals, we'd lay a blanket on the living room floor and eat on it. Like a picnic. My parents didn't want to get any food on the carpet. Instead of set the table, my mom would say, "Go lay out the blanket." I remember being really confused when I learned every family didn't have a food blanket. Maybe it's not a house rule. But when I was 6, my mom told me that if I behaved, she would let me skip school on Saturdays and Sundays. One day my teacher said, "See you Monday," and I knew. We weren't allowed to watch anything remotely sexual, like if people were kissing on screen, my mom would freak out and run to cover the TV with a pillow and go blah blah cough cough loudly until it was over. Once I tried to see a PG-13 movie with my friends and my mom cried and my dad called me horrible for making her cry. I was 14. I wasn't allowed to take a shower if I was home alone. I also learned at age 7 that other households closed the bathroom door when using the toilet and keeping it open was weird. I learned that by keeping the door open at a friend's house. A friend walked by the bathroom, saw me, told their mom. Their mom called my mom. And all of a sudden the new house rule was we close the bathroom door when using the toilet. We weren't allowed to get into the fridge or the cabinets without asking permission. My family was very poor and we had a limited food budget. So eating something without permission very possibly meant eating one ingredient of a meal my stepmother was planning on cooking within the next few days. I went to friends' houses and they just ate whatever they wanted. Whenever they wanted. We weren't allowed to walk in our dining room unless we were using the room for a special occasion. The carpet always had that just vacuumed look, so it was a dead giveaway if anyone walked across it. If you don't get A's, you don't eat at the table. I legit thought this was normal until I had dinner at a friend's house and my friend brought home a devastating report card. His parents were so supportive and loving. Edit, I'm not Asian, you guys. Not a rule. But still to this day I am befuddled at my mother's reasoning. When I was a boy we lived in a pretty rural part of Mexico. Horrible infrastructure. Power would often go out in the middle of the night. She would proceed to wake my brother and I up. Simply to wait until the power came back on. For the life of me I cannot figure that out. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She just wanted to make sure we saw the power return. Edit. Everyone keeps suggesting because if fire reasons, and come to think of it, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's actually how we lost that house. Maybe my mother is clairvoyant. No curfew as long as I told my mom where I would be. I was always honest BCS, I loved being 16 with no curfew. Any of the kids, 7 of us, can play with any toy that is left out. The owner of the toy can't take it back until whoever's playing with it is done. If the toy is put away in the owner's room, permission must be asked. My mom freaks out about hearing commercials on TV. The second it goes to commercial break it has to be muted. She also mutes it if she thinks it's about to go to commercial. Even though sometimes she's wrong. And she doesn't really pay attention. So she doesn't notice a lot of the time when the commercials are over, so she leaves it on mute when the show is back on. It's very difficult to watch TV with her. If you couldn't find something, and you asked someone for help, sibling or parent, and they found it for you, they got to punch you in the arm. When I got in trouble I was put on reading restriction as a punishment. I loved to read as a kid, still do, so it was an effective punishment at the time. Wasn't in my home, but my aunt and uncle never let us use the upstairs washroom when we were kids because they thought we'd touch the walls with our dirty hands, so they made us piss in a jar they kept under the kitchen sink and just poured it down the drain when we were done. Never thought it was strange until I brought it up to my cousin a few years ago. We laughed pretty hard about it. Not being allowed to leave the table until your meal was finished. I remember eating at a friend's house and looking really uncomfortable trying to finish a food I didn't like. Only to be told, you don't have to finish it if you don't want to. Mind blowing. Bare skin was not allowed to touch the leather sofa. No shorts. Bare feet. Tank tops. Etc. Also we had to peel mushrooms. It took forever and was completely stupid. When I was sick I couldn't be in my bed because it would make it dirty. My mom put a towel in a corner on the hardwood floor and I had to stay there until she de-aired me better enough to use my bed. My parents used a laissez-faire parenting style. No censorship whatsoever. I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show with my brother when I was 7. Pretty awkward when I brought the VHS with me to a sleepover at a friend's house. The parents were mortified. My sister and I had to read for 30 minutes after school. My parents weren't even home. But we would tattle on each other. Another rule was, I couldn't tell anyone when a certain uncle was staying with us because he was dodging an arrest warrant. Edit. This is my most popular post. To clear a few things up. My uncle isn't a pedophile or a violent offender. He's an addict and a thief. Also, my sister and I weren't taught to snitch on each other. We were just enemies. Looking back, we could have gotten away with a lot if we'd teamed up. Edit 2, my first coins. Thank you kind stranger. Edit 3, and silver. Thank you. Wissy article. My dad made a rule that I had to kill 7 flies a day during my summer break. First thing upon coming in the house you have to change into clean pants and wash your hands. Guests were exempt from the pants rule but not hand washing. If you took your shoes off while you were out you had to change your socks as well. Take half the house off in winter. If I told my parents I was leaving at a certain time, I had to leave at that time. Let's say I told my parents I would leave a party at 9. I couldn't leave at 8:50. Or I'd get yelled at grounded. I couldn't leave at 9:10. Or I would get yelled grounded. Same thing went for when I was leaving my house to go somewhere. I was not allowed to clear my plate when eating. I had to always leave some food on the plate. If I wanted to eat that much, I had to go get a little more to leave on the plate. The exact opposite of what most people have as a household rule. Edit, for those confused. I clarify in comments below. I super enjoyed all the new cultural knowledge. I'm going to bed. Leave the porch light on until everyone is home. After I moved out and lived with my boyfriend, I remember getting angry with him for not leaving the porch light on when he knew I would be home late. His response was pretty much, but you didn't ask me to. Don't eat the last of something without first asking if anyone else wants any. Same boyfriend. Poor guy. Ate the last of the cookies. I was so mad that he didn't ask if I wanted any. This was the first time either of us lived away from our parents. So we had a lot of weight. Your family doesn't do this? Conversations. Edit. I'm not looking for advice on whether or not my boyfriend is rude or if these are red flags. We broke up 20 years ago. We weren't allowed to eat anything without first asking. Even a glass of water. We were required to ask first. When my boyfriend and I started dating, I would ask his parents if I could eat or drink something if I was hungry or thirsty, and it was a hard habit to break when his mom told me I could literally eat or drink anything other than the alcohol. It was so weird to just go into the fridge or pantry without permission. I sometimes have to fight the urge to ask my BF if I can eat our food in our apartment. When I went to my parents' house over Christmas, I was reprimanded for getting an apple without asking first. It's just all so weird, but it used to be so normal. Our bedtime in high school was 9 p.m. We weren't allowed to eat any food past 7 p.m. No television before 5 or after 8. And dinner is at 6. No swearing, which includes the obvious as well as stupid. Idiot. Shut up and fart. No singing at the table. Unless it's a birthday. Still to this day I don't cope well with quiet. But I guess when I was a kid the karaoke party never stopped. It was a good rule. But not necessary for most households. Was literally told by my best friend's dad I was only allowed to eat popcorn one kernel at a time. My parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth. Before we got in bed. If they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs in our teeth and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real we would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them. But by the time we got to be 13 we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. I love thinking about creative parenting tactics like this. I've even used that one while babysitting a fussy kid who doesn't want to brush their teeth get ready for bed and it helps a lot. Not being allowed to hang out with girls. At all. Edit. I am in fact a male. Edit again. Thank you for all the upvotes. We had to have milk after dinner. But before bed. Asked my mom when I was older what that was about and she realized we could have just had milk with dinner if we wanted. But she had been raised kosher so it wasn't something she thought about. We had family council every Sunday night after dinner. We would sit and say good things that happened that week. Share our grievances if we had any. We always did. Make a dinner menu. And assign chores. Frankly. It was stellar parenting. Though. If I mention it to my mother now. She will brag about it for a solid 20 minutes before we can move on. Edit. Thank you magical human who gave me gold. Wacky time. No noise annoying mum and dad until 7 a.m. This was a really necessary one BC. I was a very early riser as a kid and I loved to talk to my parents. The rule was that I could come to their bed and curl up next to them. But I couldn't talk until 7. It was actually really nice. And made sure I got enough rest myself. Tragically. Once I started rowing like 7 years later. Mum and dad had to get up at 4 anyway to get me to the sheds. Sorry guys. I grew up with 6 siblings. In the TV room. There were more people than couch seats. We had a rule that you couldn't steal someone's seat if they got up to go the bathroom. Get a drink. Etc. My parents instituted it because of all the fights that would happen over seats. We all instantly realized how great a rule it was. No more arguments. But more importantly, your seat was safe for the night. I never thought it was a normal rule as defined by the OP. But it is a great rule that every family should have. No going places on my own. It's not a rule but I get in trouble for going places and I'm never given permission to go anywhere. Turns out all my friends can be just about anywhere and I am stuck saying can't man. My mom said no. I had to wash the dishes every night. Even if I wasn't home for the meal. There were times I'd get home from an away basketball game. I was in the team. After 10 p.m. and the dishes had sat since they finished reading around 6:30 p.m. My older brother's nightly chore? Take out the garbage. He'd be done in 2 minutes. I'd have 30 plus minutes of washing, drying, putting away, and cleaning up the kitchen. Vegetables, a little or a lot? That was my mom's response when I didn't want to eat them. If I got hurt doing a certain activity I wasn't allowed to do that activity again. My mother ended that rule though when I broke my wrist snowboarding when I was 16 and didn't tell her until a month later when I couldn't move my wrist at all and it required surgery with a bone graft to repair. Eating dinner as a family. At the table. I met so many people in college who thought that whole idea was absurd. My dad used to set up mine and my sister's Easter egg hunts in such a way we followed written clues from place to place. As way to help us learn to read. Until I was a young adult. I assumed that was how all kids did Easter egg hunts. I had super laid back parents but there were a few certain things that they were randomly crazy strict about. No gum. No Play-Doh. No cereal with sugar as one of the top 3 ingredients. No Simpsons. I had basically no rules growing up. But those 4 things would make them lose their goddamn minds. I still get anxious when I'm chewing gum and I'm 35. No whistling. I wasn't allowed to play in the living room as a child. If I played too loud in my room I was also whooped. My dad's golden rule was children are meant to be seen, not heard. As a result, I allow my children to play anywhere in the house. As loudly as they want. As long as they clean it up. Just the other day my son held a rock concert in the living room with his new toy guitar and amplifier. The music was terrible. But his smile made it worth it. No soda. I didn't drink soda unless I was at a friend's because that was normally all they had. My parents were super healthy people so they mostly drank water, juice, tea, and lemonade. Not my rule but this happened during a playdate. I had my daughter, 3, at a friend's place, also 3, and my daughter asked for a hug and her friend said no thank you very politely. Then her mom shot across the room and started screaming at her daughter, you don't do that. If someone wants a hug it's mean to say no, while my daughter's friend was crying and apologizing. I tried to explain that it's fine and I'm teaching my daughter, okay, do you want to give a hug, high five, or wave? To show her about consent early so I really don't mind and my daughter understands. But I never heard reasoning behind that strict rule. Keep bread in the freezer. Apparently not a lot of people do that. No romantic relationships until you're 18. In my case. It seems then it will go on even further. I couldn't add the jokes in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer song. My dad thought it was disrespectful. It's not really a house rule, it's just a really odd one. Also, when a parent says your name you have to reply coming not yeah because they'll ignore it. Not so much a rule as a tradition. When dad got home from work, he would immediately change into PJs. And that was our time to do the same if desired. Watching TV shows where someone would drop in by surprise. And the parents would just welcome them in. Seemed like some Hollywood BS to me. Like the mother who never left the kitchen. Lid down before you flush. I thought it was weird as a kid. But I understand it now. Little bits of whatever's in the bowl aerosolizes when you flush. If the lid is down, it's less gross than it raining poo germs on your toothbrush. As a kid, my family was the only household I was ever in where the toilet lids were down. I have recently imparted this rule on my so with regard to my apartment. He always puts down the seat, very kind of him to begin with. But now he puts down the lid too. I love him. But his poo germs can stay off my toothbrush. Editing to linker, study, https://www. Journal of Hospital Infection. Com article S0195-6701, divided by 2811 divided by 2,900,339-2 /full about bacterial spread with lid up versus down. I'm glad you all like Mythbusters as much as me. But this is also worth a read. Don't touch the walls. I was allowed, and encouraged, to call all adults by their first names. The only exceptions being my teachers. It fucking blew my mind when I was like 10 and started going to a snooty new school when my mom pulled me aside and told me I had to start calling people Mr. Last name, or Mrs. Last name. Even now, 20 plus years later, saying Mr. or Mrs. to anyone who isn't a teacher feels really fucking weird. My dad always tells me not to lock any doors in the house including my room door and the bathroom door. Not being allowed to lock my bedroom door. Even if I was changing or just got out of the shower. My father never let us talk around the dinner table. Once when I was 15 I asked everyone around the table how they were doing and how their day was. My dad got up angrily after hurriedly finishing his meal and said, I can't stand people talking around a meal. If I wanted to talk to you I would. We finished our meal in silence. When riding in the car at night it is illegal to have the interior dome light on. I genuinely believed that was true until I was about 28 years old. I wasn't allowed in my parents' room. At all. Not even to use their shower if the hall bath was occupied and we were going to be late. My mom gave me a kitchen timer to use whenever I used the computer. 1 hour of games per week for little kid me. Wasn't until much later that I realized plenty of my friends were given much more freedom to play whatever they wanted whenever they wanted. And I resented my parents for it. Wasn't until much later than that I realized the timer probably kept me in school because young me would have gained my entire education away. Not everyone knows how to wipe down a counter correctly. Also, my grandmother made us take etiquette classes. Like we had to walk in heels with books on our heads. We had to learn how to set a table for every occasion and proper table manners. It's actually come in handy now that I'm older and have work dinners, but it was weird when I found out literally no other family does this. We had a no-no room. A room where we simply just couldn't go in because it was full of antiques. Also, my black friend wasn't able to come over. I didn't know why, so I had her over anyways and we walked to my house after school. Didn't realize the Black History memorabilia my dad had hanging around the house was actually racist. We had a black maid when I was little. So I never realized anything was wrong with it. It was promptly moved to the attic instead of having a display corner. But my dad still didn't want her over. No use in rubbing in her face a house she'll never have. I just realized that my dad was an asshole after that. When you have friends around the door, you're not to feed them, give them drinks, or let them in to use the bathroom for any reason at all. I come from a large family. Anytime we'd order pizza, we ordered a few different kinds because, obviously, there were different preferences. Any leftovers were left in their respective boxes and placed in the oven. I did that when I lived with a couple of roommates and of course their reaction was, I just burned this box. Why was this in the fucking oven? Not mine, but my mother-in-law and her sister will fuss at you if you wash your hands in the kitchen sink. I think that's weird. If there's a sink and some hand soap, I say wash away. My wife isn't like that. Finishing all the food on my plate. I was 7. Or somewhere in there. And couldn't handle eating spaghetti squash. It was the taste that triggered my gag reflex. Well, what do you know? I blow chunks after my stepdad demanded I eat it. I stare at the vomit crying and he makes me eat some of it saying I was wasting food. Piece of shit doesn't deserve the title dad anywhere near his name. If you ever ran out of toilet paper whilst on the toilet, you had to sing the Stranded song or else no one else in the house would bring you a roll. No screaming when playing. My mom told me someone might think I was in trouble and needed help. The room in my house that was used for extra storage was always called the sewing room. I've never seen so much as a sewing machine in there. Edit. Thanks, stranger. I was not aware that other kids had no homework over summer. My mom assigned papers, projects, reading, and math workbooks. Real summer sounds fun. Not my family. But my sister dated a guy whose dad didn't allow dishes in the sink. Walking into someone's house with a spotless sink and dishes on the kitchen table is bizarre. Sorry means you'll never do it again or simply having immediate apologies responded to with contempt. This meant, don't apologize unless you're prepared to make a significant commitment to change. This has 2 outcomes. 1. Apologize and never do the bad thing again, or 2. More often, because it's hard to ensure you never do a thing again. Delay the apology until I have had an opportunity to demonstrate an effort to change and then verbally apologize with my actions legitimizing my apology. It was only pointed out to me yesterday by my so that it's super frustrating and emotionally taxing for her that I don't apologize even though I'm great at taking responsibility and changing my behavior when I've been stupid or selfish. Haha. Asking to have a glass of milk. No eating in front of the TV. Only at the dinner table. We weren't allowed to watch Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons. I loved The Simpsons and watched every week. but had to turn off the TV for a minute if Itchy and Scratchy came on because it was too violent. Edit to correct my spelling since it seems to bother people. My dyslexic brain has trouble figuring out the correct spelling and I gave up on it years ago. No milk in glasses. Not so much a rule. But I got rules implemented based on what TV show characters did. I guess my parents, my mom specifically, assumed that stuff was normal. If I talked back I'd get quiet days where the rest of the day I wasn't allowed to talk to my parents. At all. If I did, I lost privileges like my phone or I'd get grounded. Kinda weird looking back. My dad used to give me all the change in his pocket to leave him and my mom alone so they could shut their bedroom door and talk. It wasn't till many years later that I realized I was basically pimping out my mom. This is probably a little different from everyone else's since I live, on a tree farm in Montana. We had a few rules that make sense but they're for problems not many people have to deal with. So here's a bit of list. Don't pet the deer. Don't shoot towards the house, or people die. No sledding in the road. No going outside without my walkie-talkie, middle of nowhere so safe from people. Just need to be able to help parents find me if I go too far. If you're outside you must be loud, let the bears know you're there. If you're outside keep the dogs near you. Don't eat berries you find in the wood. If you find poop that's not deer or dog poop turn around. Probably a bunch more. Plus obvious things. No strangers. Don't feed the dogs chocolate. Don't touch the stove. etc. We had cereal for breakfast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Tuesdays and Thursdays we had eggs. I thought everyone did something similar. No food in bedrooms. That one came from my mom being fed up with food stains on the carpets and sheets. And crumbs in the bed. Also. You got one cup for the day. No getting a fresh cup with each drink of water. We were allowed to get a new one if we had milk or juice in it. But if it was water or Kool-Aid, you reuse the same one all day. Came from having 6 kids in the house plus their friends and running out of dishes when everyone would keep getting a fresh glass. I didn't realize this wasn't a thing everywhere till I got married and my husband asked one day why I would put all my other dishes in the sink, but leave my cup out sometimes. Solved the difference in styles by switching to a water bottle and using cups only for milk, which I always put in the sink dishwasher immediately. We were not allowed to do any chores. My parents didn't trust us to clean the house correctly. And they definitely didn't trust us to do yard work the way they wanted. We had to wash our own dishes if we made food but never after a family meal. And we weren't allowed to do our own laundry until we went away to college. I still don't know how to mow a lawn and I'm 27. This is 100% true. Visitors were never allowed inside. So if someone wanted to come by to play or just hang out, you had to go out to the yard to entertain them no matter if it was night or day. Likewise we weren't allowed to go into other people's homes. I've had so many conversations on porches. We sleep at 9:30 p.m. No noise allowed after 8 p.m. Dad works early AM shift. We weren't allowed to have anything. Not even water. To drink during dinner until we finished eating. My door could only be closed if I was changing clothes. If my parents suspected that I was hiding anything, they could, and did, go through anything to make sure. Dresser and desk drawers. Bags. Closet. Car. Whatever they felt was necessary. Even my mail was fair game. As a result, I got really good at hiding things. My dad had a horrible rule. He checked even my sister's, genitals every week. It ended when my sister, she was 16 BTW, called CPS on him. He was arrested for sexual assault. I had to earn bottles of water and plates of food. Earning it meant perfectly abiding by insane rules, which were based more on not making my dad angry instead of anything moral, or doing some sort of chore like cleaning the kitchen. If I didn't earn my food or water I wouldn't get any. But maybe 1/3 of the time I'd get a little bit of water or a little food to get by on. We had a rule that you had to say no one is to take my place if you got up to get a drink or go to the loo. Otherwise your place was free to be taken. There were 6 of us and not enough seats for everyone to watch TV comfortably. We also had the you cut, I choose rule, which meant when dividing anything like cake, sweets etc., the person doing the division had to be the last served. Which meant we always were scrupulously fair about dividing things up. I thought every family had this rule. But my husband's mother had a policy of giving half of anything to the next person when dividing things, on the basis that you never run out that way. It meant that honored guests got huge portions. And the lower down the list, the smaller your portion size would be.